Hey guys, so I'm back again, not so long of a distance between my videos this time. I thought I'd do a video for you on some tips I have for people who are going to be going on their first field school. My field school background is that I spent 3 summers consecutively doing the field school that was offered by my university in the Kingdom of Jordan, and then as well during my master's I did 3 weeks of a more lab-focused field school while I was in Bulgaria. Because I've had some extensive experience and I've also been back a few times, I thought I'd compile some things that I've learned for you in order to make someone's first time going out on field school easier. Because the majority of my field school has been located in the Middle East, so a very dry and hot country, the advice that I'm going to give is tailored towards digging in that climate. However, a lot of the stuff that I'm going to be talking about you can apply pretty much anywhere. To start with, I want to talk about what you're supposed to be packing. So most schools will provide you with a list of what they recommend that you bring with you, which by and large I would follow, but there's a couple things which from personal experience I would advise bringing or not bringing with you. So kind of the number one thing for me was bringing tons of underwear and socks. When I was away in Jordan, we had access to a laundry service that we could get through our accommodation. However, it did cost money per item, so it's not really something you want to be using on everything, and the general rule was that you weren't allowed to use it for like personal things like your underwear and your socks. So I always took with me about 14 pairs of each, or 7 to 14, whichever, something that'll get you through the week. On a weekend you can do some laundry in your bathroom that's provided. Where I was staying, we would just go out when we first arrived and buy a round tub from just kind of a generic homeware store with some laundry detergent and something for hanging wet things. And then we would just do our laundry on weekends and take turns and hang them out to dry. Luckily for us, because we lived in a very, very hot place, it did not take long at all for our things to dry, so you never really had to worry about things not being ready in time for the next week. Although, as I said, I would always pack a little bit more than you think you need, just in case for some reason you don't have the time to do your laundry and you're going to have to put it off a little bit. Obviously, if you're going on an archaeological dig, you should always bring a trowel with you. Most people will provide it, but it's kind of like I've spoken about in other videos, it tends to be a very personal thing and people like to have their own trowels. If you want to know more about trowels, check out my video about essential tools for archaeologists. You'll find more information there. The next thing I think you should be packing clothes-wise would definitely be a hat and sunscreen or some kind of sun protection, as well as sunglasses, especially if you're going to a very hot place like I did. It's very easy to get dehydrated and to get sunstroke, so having that coverage is very, very much advised with a high SPF. If you're worried about getting a tan, I mean, you're working outdoors for an extended period of time, like it's going to happen. You don't really want to be working in that with a sunburn. You'll have time on weekends to tan and do as much as you want, but it's just not advisable, unless you're one of those people that just doesn't burn, to not bring sunscreen with you. You should also have a really sturdy, good pair of boots. They don't have to be like industrial steel toe grade kind of stuff. You can probably find something at a local outdoors hiking store. I personally used a pair of like steel-toed hiking boots. Make sure that they have ankle support because that is really important. And those served me very well for 3 years. In terms of weather of clothing, you should really, for the actual dig, you should be packing weather-appropriate clothing. So if you're going somewhere that's really rainy, make sure you have lots of waterproofs. If you're going somewhere like I did that's very hot and dry and dusty, contrary to what you might think, I would advise packing a lot of very loose, long-sleeve clothing, especially when you're going to the Middle East. The general rule of when I was on field school was that you should have your shoulders and knees covered on site, and in general at all times, because nobody wants to get harassed. And also on our site it was a bit more of a safety thing as well. The more of you that's covered by fabric, the less of you is exposed to the sun, so it brings down your likelihood of getting some kind of sunstroke or heat stroke. you might think that that's going to make you even hotter, but it's not really true. As long as the clothing is loose enough and not very tight to your skin, and it's light clothing, it's not very heavy, you're not really going to have a problem. I also didn't tend to buy stuff that was very expensive, because working on a dig, you're going to ruin things. It's just the way it is. You're very, very hard on your clothing no matter what. So I would advise buying stuff either from like a charity shop or a used clothing store, or because I was living in Canada at the time, I went to Mark's Work Warehouse, which has work-specific clothing, and I got some nurse scrub pants, which were actually a godsend for digging because they are very light, stretchy, easy to clean, they have lots of pockets, and they're cheap. They're not designed to be really expensive. So that's kind of like one piece of clothing that I would really, really, really recommend for people to have. When I was in Jordan as well, one of the first things that I bought was a keffiyeh, which is those scarves that you see a lot of people wear. I just bought a generic, very light fabric white one, and it was not expensive at all, and it was a godsend. Like, it was probably the most useful thing that I had with me on site. You can use it as a shade cloth, you can use it to clean stuff off, or if you're getting really, really hot in the middle of the day, you can put water on it and use it to cool yourself off. If you find that you're starting to get dehydrated or sunstroke, putting some water on some and putting it on the back of your neck and just sitting in the shade, highly, highly recommend. For the sake of the environment, I would also advise bringing your own water bottle, because generally in quite a few countries, it's not going to be recommended that you use the tap water. So instead of having to buy plastic bottle, like just tons and tons of plastic bottles, you're better off just buying one giant one from the store and then filling up your own water bottle day to day as you want. What I'm going to kind of talk about is going to focus on health and how to kind of like keep yourself healthy and fit for being on a dig. If you're considering doing a dig, you should know that it is going to require you to do physical labor, so you need to be prepared for that. If you have any health issues, make sure you always let people know before you get into the field. We had one girl once who she had a problem with getting her blood taken, and we had to have a blood test in order to retain our visas at the country at the time, which was a bit crazy. But she didn't tell anybody that she'd had this issue with her blood not clotting after she got blood taken, and then had a like petit mal seizure in the middle of the hospital. And freaked everybody out. So, you know, it's just kind of one of those things where if you have an issue or an allergy or something that somebody needs to know about, make sure somebody knows. Make sure your health insurance and any medication that you need is sorted and you have supplies of it, and even extra supplies if you can before you go over. Digs will have pretty generic stuff, and you can always find something in a pharmacy, but if you're going to a foreign country to do this, then you want to make sure that then it's just going to be easier for you to have medication that has directions in your own language, and you're not going to have to try and figure out how to use it where there's going to possibly be communication issues. I briefly touched about having water before. Dehydration is in general a big issue, especially on digs in the Middle East, but can be anywhere. Make sure that you are ingesting a proper amount of water each day, especially somewhere like Jordan where it's a very, 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 very dry heat, and it's very, 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 very hot. So it is so dry and so hot there that you actually cannot, you don't feel yourself sweating. It evaporates before you start to feel disgusting and gross. So you don't really register how much water you're losing in your body, and before you know it, you can be dehydrated and puking and like either needing to go to the hospital or sit out the day, which is not going to look very good. In terms of food and diet, it was recommended when I first went to field school at our kind of generic meeting before everybody left, that if you were vegetarian, you might want to consider not being vegetarian while we were away. I know this is an ethical issue for a lot of people, and people don't want to compromise that for the sake of going on a dig. However, if you're going to like foreign countries like the Middle East, or I think probably quite a few places in South America, or even when I was in Bulgaria, like vegetarianism and veganism and stuff like that, it's not really a thing. And if you're going somewhere where meals are being provided for you and you're not having to cook for yourself, it's going to be difficult for you to find enough food that has enough protein and nutrients for you to keep you healthy and making sure that you're getting enough calories, considering that you're burning while you're away. So if you are vegetarian or vegan, you need to kind of plan for that in advance if you are not willing to kind of go off it for a month while you're away. I mean, Jordan, you could certainly get by with being vegetarian. Vegan, I think, would be a lot more difficult, but it's your own choice. You can't be forced to give it up. Additionally, I would also recommend getting some kind of going to like a travel clinic before and talking to people about where you're going and seeing if it's advised for you to take any medication for having traveler's diarrhea or anything that you can take before you go to help prepare your system so that you don't get traveler's diarrhea. It's really an uncomfortable topic, but I mean, I remember one of my professors, like, at our meeting again, he was saying, like, you would be surprised about how, you know, everybody arrives there and it's all crazy, and then by the second week everyone's best friends and everyone's just talking about their poo, because it's just like, yeah, it can be a bit crazy sometimes if you don't take the proper precautions, and then you end up eating something that doesn't agree with you. It just doesn't end up being pleasant. I had a friend once, within like the first week that we were there, went out to get some like street meat from a vendor, and he did not have a pleasant time of it the day after. So, as I said before, generally, like Jordan, where I was, we weren't supposed to be drinking the tap water. You could use it for brushing your teeth and stuff, but not every day. It would just not good for your system. You're not used to the bacteria that they have in their water, and they also didn't have like continual running water like we did. Everything was stored at in a tank on top of our accommodation. So we all just got these big, we went to the place called the Water Store. Nobody actually knew the actual name of it. And we got these big water buoys like you would see on top of a cooler in an office, that then came with a pump, and we could pump that into our water every day. If you also have access to a fridge, I would recommend filling your water up the night before and putting it in the fridge or the freezer if you can freeze it, and then taking it onto site during the day and leaving it in a place that's shaded. Usually you will end up sometimes with somebody having some kind of sickness within the first week or so, but if you can take steps to avoid it, I would highly, highly recommend it. In addition to making sure that you're hydrated, it's also important to remember to replace your salt, because a lot of people realize, okay, I'm sweating, I'm losing water, like I need to drink. You're also losing salt in that sweat, and so you need to replace that in order to avoid getting sunstroke. Some people will take salt tablets, but I've heard those are really disgusting. My personal practice was I went out and bought like a can of Pringles or crisps or chips, something that was like a salty snack, and I would bring that with me on site, and I would just kind of have some of that whenever I was at break time. And I never had any issues at all. And I actually ended up having to give it out quite a few times to people when they just really, really weren't feeling well and they needed to sit down and have some water and something to eat. In terms of alcoholic adult beverages, if you're an archaeologist, you probably already have even if you're a first year, you probably have a good idea about the fact that archaeologists like to drink, especially on field school. It's just a thing, like, you know, you're in a foreign country, you don't speak the language, you can't like really watch the TV, there's not a lot going on the internet, and what's the other social activity that you have to do is like drink. So it just kind of happens every Friday, there's a party, and everybody has some good times, and then Saturday they're feeling a little hungover. They look perfectly fine and normal and totally okay on a lot of field schools. Like, I was going on field school in a Muslim country where you don't really have a lot of drinking. Fortunately, we were staying in a half Christian, half Muslim town, so there were liquor stores around that you could buy alcohol from. But yeah, it's the first week, I would definitely advise taking it easy, because you've just spent a week working, you know, very long days in the hot sun, and you, like, no matter how much water you drink, you probably are dehydrated, and you're very tired, and you've put your body under a lot of stress. Generally, in that situation, when you add alcohol to it, it means that you get absolutely plastered way sooner than you would normally have back home. And then, you know, you can have some embarrassing situations happen. So I would just say that, you know, if you want to avoid that happening, take it easy for the first week or so and give your body some time to adjust to the environment that you're going to be in. The third kind of section of this that I want to talk about is like how to conduct yourself on a dig, because most of the time on a field school you're going to be getting graded on this, or you might be interested in coming back, you want to build a good rapport with people, and you just want to leave a good impression. My two kind of top tips for making sure that this happens is to have some initiative and also to have respect. In terms of talking about initiative, I mean, don't just like stand around waiting for people to tell you what to do. Ask people if they need help. Ask them what needs to be done. I was given a really good piece of advice right before I started my first field school by a family friend who is an archaeologist, and she said, always make sure you're the first one up the hill in the morning and you're the last person down at night, and that is just really going to serve you well. I was invited back on my dig in Jordan several times as a supervisor, and I think I'd like at least to think that I had a reputation of being a hard worker. I always tried to make sure that if somebody was doing something like unloading the equipment and bringing it up, that I was assisting with that. And that I didn't leave to get on the bus until everything was put away and we were all walking down. The people that just kind of like dump all their things outside, like where you put your equipment or whatever, and then just walk down to the bus at the end of the day and just sit there and wait for everybody else. Nobody has a really good opinion of them doing that, and that's going to reflect on you, and it could even reflect on your grade. In this respect, though, you don't want to be acting like you know absolutely everything and you have a great grasp on things. I always kind of like to say that, like, I know nothing. Even though I've been doing this for a really long time, I still have so much to learn about things. So I never want to assume that I'm the ultimate authority at something, or, because I've been doing something a certain way for so long, that means that these people like it done that way and they're going to be happy with the way that I do it. I always like to make sure that I'm asking questions and making sure I'm doing things correctly and that people are happy with what I'm doing, which also serves you better because later on you're not going to have to go back and fix anything. In terms of talking about respect, this is something that I really, I think is really important towards you having a good experience and as well leaving a good impression. If you're going to be going on a field school in a foreign country, I would advise learning a little bit of the language. You don't have to be fluent. You don't even really have to be conversational. You just learning as much as saying like hello, thank you, and please will go so long in helping you out and making sure that you have a good experience. Personally, I knew that I was going to be taking my field school in the Kingdom of Jordan about 2 years in advance. It was one of the reasons I chose to go to my particular university, because I was interested in participating at that field school. And so I took a year of Arabic while I was at university right before I left. And it really served me well. I was one of the only people who could say more than just like hi or something to the people on site, so I could communicate with our workers. And it also helped because when I went into stores and stuff like that and I could say things to people in Arabic, they just not necessarily treated me better than everybody else, but you could see that they really appreciated it, that I did that. And I certainly think that it helped me in terms of like I would get shawarma or something for a non-tourist price, for a local price, rather than being gouged, because I made that effort. I didn't just expect them to speak to me in my language. This also helps really if you have workers on site. So for example, we had Bedouin with us, and I was able to communicate with my Bedouin eventually at a level where I didn't need another person around to help me translate. And also, it's key to remember that even if they don't speak a lot of English, they probably have been working at this place for a long time and they understand way, way more than they let on. Sometimes people will just say things in front of their workers that aren't exactly nice, or they're derogatory, or something about the workers in front of them because they think, oh, you don't understand English, you don't know what I'm talking about. Well, they probably do, and that just means that, you're not going to get any more work out of them. Like, if you're standing there complaining to your supervisor that your worker is being lazy, it's really not going to make the situation any better if you're saying that in front of him, because I can guarantee he probably understands what you're saying and he doesn't appreciate it. These people will know a lot. Just because maybe they're not very well educated in their country or something like that, it doesn't mean that they're stupid. and also you are a guest in their country, and they like deserve for you to treat them with respect and not like they're just some like dumb person that's just hauling buckets for you and is like under your authority. That's just not the right attitude to have about it. Same thing where if you have somebody who is set above you as like a supervisor or a field director, I mean, it seems like it's common sense, but I would always advise treating them with like respect and deference. I've seen situations where, you know, maybe more elderly or senior volunteers have, you know, had an attitude about these things, and that's just not really going to get you anywhere, thinking that you know better than the person who is your superior. It's just, chances are they've been working there for a lot longer, they know a lot more than you, and there's probably a reason they're telling you to do something a specific way rather than the way that you want to do it. So the last thing I want to talk about is your safety. So this is always kind of a key thing whenever you're away from home. I would just always generally advise, if you're on a tour or you're walking around town, try and do everything in like groups or pairs. Being by yourself, especially in a country where you don't speak the language, and you don't know where you are or where you're going, just not advisable. It's just not safe. Doesn't matter if you're a boy or a girl. In the Middle East, unfortunately, it is the case that it's likely that if you're a woman and you're Western, you will probably get some kind of street harassment. In that respect, it is definitely advisable to travel in a group because you just don't want a situation to happen. I've never known a situation to happen, but that's because my school was very clear on like the guidelines about how to kind of not protect ourselves, but to make sure that we weren't going to accidentally put ourselves in a situation. For women as well, this is kind of particular to the Middle East. Like I said, for the clothing, even on off-site, I would always advise in the Middle East, shoulders and knees covered. It's just better that way. Unfortunately, you can't dress however you want, and it should not be that way, but you're just going to avoid some harassment. Some other kind of generic safety tips. One particular for me when I was working in the Middle East was that we were not allowed to like sit down while we were digging. When you're off at your break time and you've looked around and you have a moment, that's fine. But we were always taught to squat because we did have poisonous scorpions and snakes that were in the local area. And so if you happen to sit down on a loose patch of dirt and there's a scorpion in it, you're going to have a very unpleasant time, and it could potentially kill you. The general rule with scorpions is that the smaller they are and the clearer or more colorless they are, the more likely they are to be deadly. If you don't want to kill said scorpion or snake, run away, and generally someone will come and kill it for you. Don't feel bad about it. Like, it's just a safety thing. In that respect, you should also not be putting your hands into anything where you can't see into it first. You don't want to get bit or stung or anything. It's just not a pleasant experience for anybody. You don't want to have to go to the hospital. And places like the site I was on, generally, they don't have anti-venom. So they don't have the refrigeration facilities available to carry it on site, and you're going to have a half-hour drive to the hospital. So you just don't want to take that risk. Just kill it or have somebody kill it and move on. Additionally, somewhere like when I was in Jordan has a lot of feral animals, such as including cats and dogs. Like, they are not pets over there. If there is a pet, it's generally going to look very well looked after and be on a leash. If you see dogs or cats around, I know that people have very soft hearts and you want to help them out. Just not advisable. You don't know if they have fleas or rabies, or if they have a bad temperament and they're going to like attack or scratch you. So just avoid them in general. In general, at any field school, even if you're at home, because you know you could be doing one where you're camping or you're staying out in the middle of nowhere, is to prepare yourself for rough conditions. If you're somebody that likes camping, you're not going to have any kind of issue. But if that's not what you're used to, you kind of have to come to grips with the fact that you're going to be going without or with very little of something that you're used to having for an extended period of time. For example, when I was in Jordan. And this has also kind of happened while I was on vacation, actually, in Greece, but in several countries. Their plumbing system is not sophisticated enough for toilet paper. Ergo, we had to do our business, use the toilet paper, and put it in a plastic bin in the washroom that got emptied every day. It's not a big deal. It doesn't really matter. I mean, you get used to it very, very quickly. Additionally, in Jordan, their water supply is very, very low. A guy comes along once a week, turns on the taps to the reservoir, and fills up the tank on top of your house, and then that's what you have for the week. We were told that we had to take military showers while we were over there. You might not have access to the internet, or, you know, your phone isn't going to work, or you're not willing to pay an exorbitant amount of money to have it working overseas. You just kind of have to prepare yourself that you're going to be going without some of these luxuries that you're used to. That being said, field school is an absolutely amazing, amazing experience, and I could not recommend it more. I have made so many friendships. I have so many amazing stories. I learned so many things when I was over there. It was worth every single penny. I have lifelong friendships that I've made out of it, people that I still talk to, and like even now, years later, I think back on those times and I'm just like, it just makes me so nostalgic and homesick, and I wish that I could just relive it again, because it was just an awesome experience and I would never ever regret it. I hope that the advice that I've given here today helps you out a little bit. If you have any questions, please put them in the comment section and I'll see what I can do to help you out. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like or subscribe if you feel like it. And I'll talk to you again soon. Okay, thanks guys. Bye!